Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's broadcaster Danny Kelly and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 4 o'clock. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. Messages of support have been posted after Buckingham Palace confirmed the Queen has tested positive for COVID. In a statement, the palace said Her Majesty's experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but expects to carry out light duties this week. The head of state, who's 95 years old, tested positive after coming in direct contact with her eldest son and heir, the Prince of Wales, the week he had the virus. Buckingham Palace says she'll continue to receive medical attention and follow all appropriate guidelines. Royal commentator Dickie Arbiter told GB News she's obeyed the restrictions during the entire pandemic.
Nobody can forget that picture of the Queen sitting in the choir stalls at St George's Chapel at the funeral of her husband, the late Prince Philip, sticking to the regulations, social distancing. So they have stuck to the rules. I think the problem is that there are other members within Windsor Castle who have contracted COVID, which means that, it might have been pretty virulent, that the people that she comes in direct contact with haven't tested positive, but those sort of on the edge have.
Diggy Arbiter. Well, Grant Harold, the former royal butler to Princes Charles, William and Harry, explained how he felt when he heard the news.
It was that shock of, I hope she's okay. Literally, that shock. Just praying that she'll be okay. And thankfully, obviously, the palace have said it's mild symptoms. But the other thing that amazed me was the palace have actually made this announcement quite quickly because, as you know, they don't very often give out kind of notices about the members of the royal family and their health. This is quite significant. They've actually let everyone know at this stage that she has contracted the virus.
Grant Harold. Meanwhile, the legal requirement to self-isolate if you test positive for COVID is set to end this week. Downing Street says the Prime Minister will lift the restriction by Friday as part of his Living with COVID plan. He'll tell MPs that the vaccine programme, testing and new treatments can be relied upon to keep the public safe. Senior NHS managers have criticised the move. In a sign of easing tensions, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has agreed to trilateral talks with Ukraine. Earlier today, explosions were heard in the rebel-held city of Donetsk in the east of the country, and the Ukraine military reported the deaths of 2 soldiers. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's also warned if Russia invades, it would be the biggest conflict in Europe since World War II, and the death toll could be huge.
I'm afraid to say that the plan that we're seeing is for something that could be really the biggest war in Europe since 1945, in terms of sheer scale. I think people need to understand the sheer cost in human life that could entail, not just for Ukrainians, but also for Russians and for young Russians.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson there. Well, an amber weather warning has been issued for Northern Ireland, with Storm Franklin hitting the UK today. It comes just 2 days after Storm Eunice caused what providers say was the biggest national power outage on record. Around 155,000 people are still without electricity. Yellow weather warnings are also in place for Wales and most of England, with winds of up to 70 miles an hour expected to cause more problems. Rescuers have found the body of one of the missing passengers on a burning ferry in Greece. The discovery came just hours after a survivor was located on the stern of the vessel as it was being towed towards Corfu. The fire on the Italian-flagged Euro ferry Olympic, which was sailing from Greece to Italy, started in the early hours of Friday morning. 10 people are still unaccounted for. A helicopter has crashed dangerously close to swimmers on a crowded beach in Miami. No one on the beach was injured, but 2 of the 3 people on board were taken to hospital. They're said to be in a stable condition. And Great Britain has won its first Olympic curling gold medal in 20 years. The women's team dominated the final against Japan to win 10-3. In a message, the Queen sent her warmest congratulations to both the men's and the women's teams on their outstanding performances. Captain Eve Muirhead says it was a proud moment.
Feel phenomenal. It's a moment that we're going to remember forever. This team has put in a fantastic shift this week. We're very proud of each other, and yeah, we can't wait to celebrate together.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's get back to Nana.
So hello, good afternoon. Glad you could join us this afternoon. It's coming up to 7 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. Throughout the show, we'll bring you reaction to the news that the Queen has tested positive for coronavirus. The 95-year-old monarch is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but expects to continue light duties at Windsor over the coming week. And each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows, lessons learned, and what comes next on the outside. And today, I'll be speaking to former England international cricketer Monty Panesar. The Great British Debate this hour. Boris Johnson is set to announce his Living with COVID plan tomorrow, and it's thought that legal requirement in England to self-isolate after catching the virus will be dropped. So I'm asking, should we end self-isolation for people with COVID? And in World View, the big story, obviously today, we'll be discussing Boris Johnson's warning that Russia is planning the biggest war in Europe since 1945, and we'll cross live to Kiev to speak to a journalist there and hear the thoughts of an expert on Russia from Chatham House. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. But first, let's bring you up to date on the news that the Queen has tested positive for COVID-19. The Queen, who's 95, has been in contact with her eldest son, the Prince of Wales, who also tested positive last week. So let's go to our reporter, Ellie Costello, who's in Windsor this afternoon. So, Ellie, what do you know? What details do you have?
Good afternoon, Nana, yes. Good afternoon, Nana. Yes, there was concerning news from Buckingham Palace just before lunchtime this afternoon, confirming that the Queen had tested today positive for coronavirus. She is receiving care in Windsor Castle, just behind these walls here, and there are crowds of people gathering outside Windsor Castle now. Lots of people coming up to the camera. They're asking us if we know anything about the Queen's condition. Clearly a much-loved monarch, and lots of concern here about Her Majesty's well-being. But let me bring you that statement that we received just before lunchtime today from Buckingham Palace. It said, Buckingham Palace confirmed that the Queen has today tested positive for COVID. They say she's experiencing mild-like, cold-like symptoms. That's going to come as a huge relief to many, many people. And it also says that she will continue light duties in Windsor Castle over the coming weeks. So 2 very positive things to take from that statement, I think. One is that those symptoms are mild, a great relief for a 95-year-old monarch, an almost 96-year-old monarch who did have poor health before Christmas. It will come as a great relief that those symptoms are mild, and the fact that she does intend to continue working. Now, she has been keeping quite a low profile in the past week. She did have contact with her son, Prince Charles, on the 8th of February. 2 days after that, he tested positive for COVID, and his wife, the Duchess of Cornwall, tested positive too. She is still in self-isolation. Prince Charles has finished his, but the Queen has been staying inside Windsor Castle just in case she had contracted coronavirus, and that is indeed what has happened. She has tested positive for coronavirus today. That idea of light-based duty, she has been doing meetings with ambassadors this week via video link, so we can only assume that is something that is going to continue to happen for at least the next 10 days, perhaps the next 14 days. But I think it is a relief that we've been told as quickly as this. She only tested positive today. The statement came out just before lunchtime, and we know that she is here, her private doctor is here, and she will be receiving, of course, the very best care.
Well, Ellie, thank you so much for that report, and we'll bring you more reaction to the news that the Queen has tested positive for coronavirus throughout the show. So this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, I want to talk about the NHS, the thing that people dare speak ill of because it's apparently free. Well, firstly, we need to stop calling it that because it isn't free. Let's get to grips with that fact. We're paying for it and through the nose. And actually, if we paid for it like private medical cover, it would probably cost us more per month. And did you know that the NHS has 675 staff earning over £150,000 a year? So whilst the rest of us face a tax hike to the tune of £12 billion to clear post-pandemic waiting lists, managers at the NHS, and it is mostly managers, are being paid a feastly sum. Now, Amanda Pritchard, who is the new chief executive of NHS England, earns up to £260,000. That's £60,000 more than the previous holder of the role. And the two highest paid managers at NHS Trust received up to £310,000 each last year, almost double the salary of the Prime Minister and at least 10 times the salary of the average nurse. Those who are earning these ludicrous, eye-watering sums are mostly managers. And what's more, they're spending our money on CAC. For example, during the pandemic, not content with rainbow-filled windows as far as the eye can see from almost every household in the UK, many NHS hospitals spent thousands painting rainbow crossings. Salisbury NHS Foundation Trust spent £11,000 on 4 of the darn things, and more than 20 trusts have spent over £46,000. Ridiculous. What are we paying these people for? Managing what exactly? I mean, from where I'm looking, the NHS is one of the most badly managed things I've ever seen. Sacked a lot of them. I mean, they talk about a frontline staff shortage. Well, I'm not surprised. The caring, vocational nature of those doing the real jobs are being paid a pittance for the privilege, whilst a load of managers, almost 700 of them, are getting over 150k per year of taxpayers' cash with no accountability as to what they're actually doing with it. Collectively, that's about 100 million on these people. Think of the training this could subsidise and the incentives we could offer British people to fill the real staff shortage. We could fund the education of new nurses and doctors from this country instead of relying on cheap labour from abroad. And now we learn that not only are they not slimming down the bloated bureaucracy of the NHS, in order to clear the backlog, the government are apparently going to spend the extra £12 billion of taxpayers' money on paying NHS trusts more money if they clear the backlog faster. Oh, God. A return to payment by results. Health Secretary Sajid Javid said a payment system that incentivises strong performance and delivers value for the public. So, the long and short of it, a trust that exceeds its target gets more. A trust that doesn't gets less. Well, we saw how well that went the last time. When will they learn that monetary rewards to reach a target do not work in a healthcare setting? Especially with the disjointed network of trusts competing against each other, it will obviously result in corners being cut and priority given to conditions with faster treatments. So guess what? We, the patients, will suffer, and there's always a way round the system. Everybody knows that's how it goes. I mean, this is completely the wrong approach. Centralise the NHS, for goodness sake. Cut the waste, fire the overpaid bureaucrats, pay to train new frontline staff from this country and give them a decent wage. Stop fleecing the taxpayer and coming up with these Neolithic, harebrained schemes. NHS. It's a complete rip-off. Right, so let's get started. See, I'm smiling now. Welcome again to my panel, broadcaster Danny Kelly and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Hello and welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Happy birthday to your mum.
Oh, thank you,
saying
Nana.
that
She'll
on
appreciate
socials,
that.
so I thought, happy birthday, Calvin's mum.
Very kind.
Yeah, I did a little smile. So I'm going to start with you because I haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah.
What's going on with this NHS? What's your view on this whole sort of payment by results type culture that they're talking about?
More bloats, more waste. It's what the NHS is famous for, isn't it? I think they've been giving bonuses out throughout the COVID for people that have actually just gone to work and done their job, especially in Scotland and Wales. We're still seeing that over the last 5 years, they spent £400 million on paracetamol, for example.
That's ridiculous.
Like £3.23 a unit, when we can pay, 50p in the local pharmacist. So they're splashing out, wasting our money, as you rightly put, taxpayers' money, on things that they don't need to. So some things don't need prescriptions rather. Some things don't need elective care. For example, a lot of cosmetics you can get done on the NHS should not be on the NHS. People should be paying for private things that they don't need, that are not life-saving. And across the board, there's so much bureaucracy, so much managerial bloat and waste. I think just, like you say, centralise it or refund us.
Refund us, let us
spend our money elsewhere.
Because it's a lot of money. I mean, Danny, what's your take on this?
I'm sick of publicly funded organisations paying for rainbows, whether it's on the side of a Merseyside police car during Pride Month or whether it's NHS Trust spending, how much did you say over?
Well, it's 10,000 £11,000
just for rainbows on the road.
That spent that.
How much does paint cost?
They could have just. I mean, I would have done it. How much? It was £2,000 by one of them. Sounds like it was about £2,000 a rainbow.
Yeah.
I would have done it for that.
But these crazy examples, or the BBC, you can throw all of these at publicly funded organisations, the COPs, the NHS, and the BBC, and it's when you hear of stories like a £46,000 set of rainbows on roads, you think, who has actually signed that off?
Well, it's these managers, isn't it? £150,000 a year for these people. What are they doing? Till we do a rainbow. Let's have a discussion. Let's have a meeting. Let's talk about it. Let's paint the rainbows. What's the best price we can get? Look, I don't get it. Fine, they need to be putting money into the actual frontline staff and actually recruiting from this country and paying good wages.
Just to go back to one of your points, Calv, are you calling for like a hybrid funding model? So if it's an emergency, you get treated. If it's not an emergency, you've got to pay for it yourself.
I like the idea of free healthcare at the point of entry if it is an emergency, if you really need it.
Yeah.
But I think if you can afford to pay, you should. And I think if it's elective, you should pay for it yourself.
So you can opt out of
like cosmetic surgery, you should not get it on the NHS.
But they'll only give you cosmetic surgery if it is affecting your mental health, I think. It's not like
I think that's a very loose...
No. You can play the system.
Sure,
you can play the system. Like you've got a massive nose and you get looked at every time you walk into the boozer.
Don't be rude. Are you being rude to me again?
No, I'm rude to you. I think it's the other way round.
Some of it's our responsibility as well, not just the system. So if we, for example, have something that's not an emergency, not urgent, but we think we're concerned about, we should go to pay for it privately if we can afford it. But so many of us expect free healthcare. So many of us think, well, the NHS is free, I'm going to go there, without thinking, actually, we're paying to this system so that people who can't afford healthcare get free access. That's the point of it. That's the point of any welfare system.
But you're asking someone to morally, if you like, do the right thing.
Yeah.
But that's few and far between, isn't it? 1 in 100 would rather... I think 99 out of 100, if they could get it for nothing, they would do, wouldn't they?
Well, I think 100 out of 100, most of us would get something for nothing if we could, but it's not really nothing because we're paying for it, aren't we, really? That's a delusion we put ourselves under when we say it's free. A spokesperson for the NHS said Amanda Pritchard's salary has not changed since 2016 when she became Chief Executive of Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Trust, and there was no salary increase upon appointment as NHS Chief Executive. The cost of NHS England and NHS Improvement executives' salaries has reduced by around 20%. Crikey, what were they before? Since 2018, and the NHS is one of the most efficient health services in the world, with administrative costs of less than 2p in every pound of NHS funding, compared to 5p in Germany and 6p in France, providing taxpayers with excellent value for money. You're with me, Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should we end self-isolation for people with COVID? Prime Minister Boris Johnson is set to announce his Living with COVID plan tomorrow, and it's thought that the legal requirement in England to self-isolate after catching COVID will be dropped. So, should we end self-isolation for people with COVID? Send me your thoughts, GBViews at gbnews.uk, and tell me what you think. You can also send us a tweet at GBNews, and there is a poll up right now. Get to that poll, answer that question, because I'd love to know whether you think we should end self-isolation for people with COVID. So cast that vote now, but first, it's the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking wet and windy as Storm Franklin begins to move into the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Zooming into the southwest, and the afternoon rain will have cleared, leaving a mix of clear spells and blustery showers. It'll be windy with gales along the coasts. Across the southeast, it'll be a very wet start to the evening with some gusty winds around as well. The rain should turn more showery later on. Over to Wales now, and here we'll see plenty of showers, some of which will be wintry, especially over the mountains. Widespread gales are also likely around the coast. Let's head over to the Midlands and northwest of England, where we'll see plenty of showers this evening, with again some being rather wintry over higher ground. It'll feel chilly as well, especially in the strong winds. North-east England will get a little bit of shelter from the showers, but some will make their way across the Pennines. Winds will not feel as strong here, but it will be quite chilly too. Over in Scotland, there'll be plenty of showers, with some feeling wintry at times, even at fairly lower levels. The strongest winds will be across the southwest, with gales here. Turning to Northern Ireland now, and the winds here will continue to strengthen this evening, with severe gales possible later. An amber warning will also come into force later on tonight. OK, over tonight, Storm Franklin will continue with plenty of showers, very strong winds, especially across the northwest of the country. That's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 24 minutes after 4 o'clock, and it is time for our Great British Debate. So I'm asking, should we end self-isolation for people with COVID? Tomorrow, Boris Johnson is set to announce that people in England will no longer have to self-isolate after testing positive for coronavirus, as he sets out his plan for living with the disease. So the Prime Minister said COVID will not suddenly disappear, and we need to learn to live with this virus. and continue to protect ourselves without restricting our freedoms. We've built up strong protections against the virus over the past 2 years through the vaccine rollouts, tests, new treatments, and the best scientific understanding of what this virus can do. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time? Should we end self-isolation for people with COVID? Let's start by speaking to Dr. Tolu Adepeju, an NHS doctor. Dr. Tolu, thank you very much for joining me. Do you think that it is now is actually the right time to end this self-isolation for people who do test positive for the virus?
Well, I mean, it's quite hard to determine when the right time is. I think what Boris is making his decision on is based on the infection rate at the moment, because as we can tell, the infection rate is decreasing and we're having less admissions to hospital with COVID. So I think that we do have to move forward in terms of trying to, live with COVID. Because I think, like the point you made earlier was that it's not something that's going to go away, overnight. It's something that we are going to have to learn to live with in the long term. So in terms of, the actual isolating, it's hard to tell. It's very, very hard to tell.
But timing-wise, it does feel like it is the right time in a way, because a lot of people are just getting on with things as well. What's it like from your side in the hospitals? Is it a real problem there, or has it eased up a bit, and are people surviving better and not having the complications that were initially the problem?
I'd say, yeah, it's improving quite a lot in terms of, we're seeing the spaces that we've set out specifically for COVID. We have, less patients there. It's decreasing week by week. Wards are going back to normal, because normally you create COVID wards just for the capacity of COVID patients, but now those wards are reverting back to normal. So it is improving. We're getting, in terms of staff, less people are getting COVID. So in terms of staff and numbers are actually getting back to normal. In terms of ending the self-isolation, that will actually help with staff and numbers as well. So I feel like it's all moving towards the right direction at the moment.
You mean that ending self-isolation will help? In what way?
Just in terms of, let's say you don't have any symptoms, but you've tested positive for COVID. Even the NHS staff, you have to then self-isolate for the 5 days, and then until you get the negative LFTs, over a space of 24 hours. And that's obviously taken quite a hit for the NHS, because then you have a lot of staff that aren't coming in. And let's say you're not particularly symptomatic, it just means that there's a lot of operations that we can't do. There's a lot of elective surgeries being cancelled, things like that. So it has taken a hit on the NHS.
I see. And it seems people are getting over this particular version of the virus, and hopefully it will continue to get weaker and weaker and weaker. Do you think that also, because obviously the testing is going to be, the free lateral flow tests are going to be stopping as well, where do you stand with that? Do you think that is also a good development?
I mean, I'd say in terms of testing, it's always important to get tested. It's always important to know if you have, COVID via the lateral flow system. It's something that's very, very important, and I hope it doesn't stop. But of course, like I said, I'm not a politician, so I can't, obviously we don't make these rules. We just have to kind of, as the NHS, we just have to abide by them and try our best to make sure that we're moving in the right direction, regardless of the rules that have been made.
Well, let's hope we are. Thank you very much, Dr. Tolu Adepeju. He's an NHS doctor. Right, I'm also joined by the National Chairman of the Federation of Small Businesses, Mike Cherry, OBE. Mike, thank you for joining me this afternoon. Is this decision going to leave businesses in a difficult situation with employees, as it no longer will be a legal requirement to stay off work if you are positive with coronavirus?
No, I don't think it does put businesses in a difficult position. As with any serious illness that could be infectious, it's normal for employers to ask their employees if they don't come in to go home. And I think one of the main things that we've been asking government for is for the ongoing and permanent ability to be able to recover statutory sick pay. You may be aware that FSB and the TUC have written to the Chancellor asking for that option to be made permanent in the future, so that all employees can get statutory sick pay, and also smaller businesses can continue to recover that statutory sick pay, which obviously is a cost to them.
Would that cover self-employed as well, or is it just employees?
No, it's only employees, obviously, because it's only the employer who pays for the employee's statutory sick pay at the moment. Self-employed obviously don't come under that because they pay a lower national insurance contribution.
Yeah,
and so they are excluded from that area.
That's a worry, isn't it? Because those who are self-employed will soldier on then, potentially, if they have the virus, and that could be quite detrimental in terms of the general health care of others. Do you think that most businesses will set their own rules in any case and just, not really, take any notice of it in a sense?
I think most businesses will welcome the removing of all the restrictions, but I think we also still need access for testing, particularly if, goodness happens, variants come forward that we aren't aware of still. So I think that still needs to be something that employers can access, employees can access. But I think also we need to be recognising just how fragile the economic recovery is at the moment. We know that employers are facing massive increases in some of the costs that they're having to pay out, the same as consumers, same as the general public with energy costs, but also others in supply chains. And we face a perfect storm coming up in April with the increase in the jobs tax, the increase in national insurance for both employers and employees, on top of fresh business rates coming back. And of course, with the significant rise that's coming at the same time with the national living wage. So employers are facing a perfect storm still on rising costs when they aren't back to full trading yet.
It's going to be a very tough time for businesses and people, individuals alike. Mike, thank you very much for your contribution. That's Mike Cherry, OBE, he's the National Chairman of the Federation of Small Businesses. Right, let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. He says it is compulsory self-isolation for a positive test that is being dropped. If you have symptoms, then do what you should do for flu or other infectious diseases and take the day off. This doesn't need to be enforced by law. Yeah, I hear you, but if it isn't, then you don't get the benefit in terms of pay. Pam says, better still, restrict testing. Some people are home testing at the slightest sniffle or even for no reason. Sally says if they want to test away. It's their money and tests will no longer be free. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, on radio and online. Still to come, we'll continue the great British debate and I'm asking, should we end self-isolation for people with COVID? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel broadcaster Danny Kelly and Conservative commentator Calvin Robertson. I'll also be joined in the studio by royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams to get reaction to the news that the Queen has tested positive for COVID-19. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's 4:32. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. And as we've just been hearing, messages of support have been posted after Buckingham Palace confirmed the Queen has tested positive for COVID. In a statement, the Palace said Her Majesty is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but expects to carry out light duties this week. The head of state, who's 95, tested positive after coming in direct contact with her eldest son and heir, the Prince of Wales, the week he had the virus. The announcement comes just a few weeks after the nation's longest reigning monarch reached her historic platinum jubilee of 70 years on the throne. Buckingham Palace says she'll continue to receive medical attention and follow all the appropriate guidelines. In a sign of easing tensions, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has agreed to trilateral talks with Ukraine. This morning, explosions were heard in the rebel-held city of Donetsk in the east of the country, and the military reported the deaths of 2 soldiers. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's warned that a Russian invasion of Ukraine would be the biggest conflict in Europe since World War II. Rescuers have found the body of a missing passenger on a burning ferry in Greece. The fire on the Italian-flagged Euroferry Olympic, which was sailing to Italy, started in the early hours of Friday morning. The discovery came just hours after a survivor was located on the stern of the vessel as it was being towed towards Corfu. 10 people are still unaccounted for. An amber weather warning's been issued for Northern Ireland ahead of Storm Franklin. It comes just 2 days after Storm Eunice caused what providers say was the biggest national power outage on record. Yellow weather warnings are also in place for Wales and most of England, with winds of up to 70 miles an hour expected to cause more problems. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Nana Akua.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
If you've just tuned in, where have you been? This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're online on digital radio and on TV. And we're talking about this because it's our Great British Debate. And I'm asking, should we end self-isolation for people with COVID? Tomorrow, Boris Johnson is set to announce that people in England will no longer have to self-isolate after testing positive for COVID-19. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we end self-isolation for people with COVID? So let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster Danny Kelly and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Calvin, is this the right move?
Of course it's the right move.
Did we need to ask?
I mean, it's a cold, isn't it, at the end of the day?
No. It's not a cold at the end of the day,
actually,
because the way it works is that it could potentially give you multi-organ failure, and there is something called a cytokine storm that can happen with this virus, where your immune system attacks you, and so it isn't just a cold. That doesn't happen in a cold. So just to confirm, to let you know that it's actually quite a dangerous disease, especially if you have underlying health conditions.
See, I disagree. I don't think it's a very dangerous.
No, but you don't have maybe not for you, and I'd accept that for you, you're under 30. You're a young man. So for you, it might seem that way, but for those who are older with underlying health conditions, it can still be quite deadly.
I love how I managed to talk without moving my lips there, Nana. I think we should get rid of the self-isolation because I don't think this is a serious illness anymore. I think it is the equivalent of the common cold. The symptoms are pretty much the same for the most part, and we need to stop testing healthy people. If people feel ill from it, they should take the personal responsibility and stay home from work if that's what they'd normally do with a cold or the flu. Quite right, but it shouldn't be mandated in the law.
Thank God Omicron has come along, actually, because we can now sort of see light at the end of a very dark and long tunnel. I disagree. I think it's more than a cold. I've been listening to various experts, and they put it below Delta, but above the flu. So I guess that's significantly, in their opinion, more serious than a cold. I know a number of people in their 20s who've been bedbound, and they've all had the jabs and everything. I hope, I'm a royalist, I know you are, and I'm sure you are too. Of course, I really do love Her Majesty. She's 95, she's triple jabbed, thankfully, but we know that the symptoms, when people say it's just like a cold, the start of coronavirus, and then, it can develop into something more sinister. So I'm keeping everything crossed that it remains just like...
Well, she's had the jab, so let's fingers crossed.
Common sense, she's had the jab.
Yeah, but that's the thing, isn't it? Now, I'm not actually in disagreement with you, Calvin, in terms of ending self-isolation, but I am in disagreement with you when you call it something similar to a cold, because I know, again, I think it's 11,000 people.
Many people are
there are
saying
11,000 people in hospital, you know, and they are of various ages as well. It's not just the old and infirm. Some people who are young with no underlying health conditions have been taken quite badly with this. And actually in China, where they're having quite a serious problem with COVID-19, and I think it's the Omicron version as well. I'm just saying. Well, no, I'm just saying that. So I'm just kind of. But with
Let's not
regard to
forget
self-isolation,
the average death age from this virus is higher than the average death in the country in general. It's not as serious as people make out. But in regards to self-isolation, I think it's been quite punitive because, you know, we had a doctor on it recently, just a minute ago, saying, you know, after 10 days you can get out of self-isolation, or actually after 5 days if you test negative with an LFT, you can get out of isolation. But if you've not had the vaccine, you cannot. And it's punitive because you have to stay in for the entire period. So it doesn't actually make a difference whether you've had the vaccine or not in that instance. What they're doing there is punishing people for not taking it.
But we're not talking about that at the moment. We're just talking about general self. I think that as long as you can afford to take time off, like I'm self-employed. Now, could I take 5 days away from the garage? Probably not. Would I think it was the moral thing to do to say to my people and my team, to say, look, I've got coronavirus, I've got Omicron, so I'm going to work in the corner and I'm going to be surrounded by open windows. I think so long as you're open with people and you say, look, I'm testing positive, I'm not displaying any symptoms, but I'm coming to work.
Then why are you testing if you're not displaying symptoms?
Well, that's a great question, OK. But say you just took an LFT. I can answer that question for you.
What would you normally do at your work?
He's going to answer
I can answer that question for
that.
you. Because my 88-year-old father with lung disease, I take LFTs every time I go and see him. So I might stumble across the fact that I'm positive. So that's...
No, that wasn't the question. The question
your question is why would I...
No, what do you normally do when you're ill in your workplace? Do you stay off work?
Well, it depends it depends. If it was a common cold, as insignificant as that, and this is where we disagree about Omicron, then I would probably go into work,
I think people need to, if you have got the common cold, maybe you should start, because the thing is, we're going to police ourselves with this now. We're not going to be mandated by the state, and I actually agree that it's time to end that. That needs to go. But what we do need to do is back it up with, so that everybody, so the statutory sick pay, which is what the gentleman was talking about, the statutory sick pay needs to stay in place for people who can get paid that when they don't go to work. So that we encourage people when you're not well to actually stay at home. Because I think that's a general new mindset that I think people should take on board, that if you do have quite a nasty cold or you do have something that is potentially quite infectious to others, perhaps you should consider staying in, because the way it responds with you might be different to somebody else. But other than that, no, I think it is time to end all of this self-isolation and even the testing, because I think the testing is a bit overboard now as well. But as ever, I'd love to hear your thoughts, because the show is nothing without you. So let's welcome one of our great British voices. And this is your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you really think about the topics that we are discussing. And I'm joined by Nigel Alderson, who is a painter and decorator from Blackpool. Nigel, lovely to meet you. Should we end self-isolation for people with COVID?
Well, thanks for inviting me on your show. And I think if you've got it, you've got to isolate. You know, it's going back to people just having bad flu, and it's no good going to work if you've got flu and passing it on to everybody else. But for me, as I'm self-employed, if I had mild symptoms and I mostly work on my own, I'd just go to work and keep going. So it's a bit of both, really. You've got to be a bit responsible and think of others and see how you go on with it.
Yeah. I think, Nigel, you and I agree on that one. Thank you very much, Nigel, for your thoughts. That's Nigel Alderson. He's there. He's one of our GB voices. He's a painter and a decorator. So I'm asking you, should we end self-isolation for people with COVID? And a lot of you have been giving me your views on there. Cam says COVID has such high survival rate, it's not pandemic anymore. Just crack on with it. Lewis says it can still be deadly. Just treat it like flu. If you feel bad or test positive, just stay at home. That's common sense. And there's also a poll up on Twitter today throughout the show asking, should we end self-isolation for people with COVID? And currently, 75% of you say yes, self-isolation should end, even if you test positive. That's interesting stuff right there. And briefly, panel, you going with that? 75% of them say that.
A great vox pop from the guy in Blackpool as well, a GB News viewer, and I agree with him. I think it's the socially responsible thing to do, to inform your colleagues, listen, I've got Omicron, I'm going to take a step back, or I'll sit in the corner, the windows are open. Yeah. But I think it's the socially right thing to do. I think it is unhelpful to analogise it with a common cold. I think that is unhelpful. But yeah, I agree with the Blackpool fella.
And Calvin,
just be open and honest. If people are vulnerable, they can make their own decisions on whether they want to go to work or not. And just like we did with the cold and the flu before this, if you're ill, if you're too ill to work, don't go to work. If you can get on with the job, crack on with it.
Or if you, I also think that if you do have symptoms of a cold, which is pretty sniffly and pretty bad, I don't think you should come to work either. But yeah, I'm with that. Let's see how it goes. Well, let's bring you more reaction to the news now that the Queen has tested positive for COVID-19. The monarch is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but expects to continue light duties at Windsor over the coming week. And Prime Minister Boris Johnson tweeted, "I'm sure I speak for everyone in wishing Her Majesty the Queen a swift recovery from COVID and a rapid return to vibrant good health." The Queen is 95 and had been in contact with her eldest son, the Prince of Wales, who tested positive last week. So royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams is with me in the studio. Richard, it must have been a very busy morning for you, because this has come as since a week or so since Prince Charles tested positive. Camilla tested positive as well.
Well, that's true, and of course there have been reports that others at Windsor in the royal household have also tested positive. So we can't link this to any specific person at the moment, but undoubtedly there is concern. As you mentioned, the Queen is 96 in April, but as she's very stoical, you know, she's a person of very deep religious faith. She is allowed light duties, as we know, and she has just sent a message of congratulation to our women and men's curling team at the Beijing Winter Olympics, congratulating them on their success. So that is, I think, the sort of thing that we will be seeing, hopefully, virtually very soon too. But clearly all of this is going to be monitored by the medical team of the royal household.
I think the curling team finally won something, or we finally won something at that Olympics, but it's a bit boring, isn't it, if you ever watched that? It really bored me to tears looking at bits of that. But so this is, I mean, this comes at a time. I mean, wasn't it Andrew's birthday yesterday as well? Wasn't he 62 yesterday?
It was indeed, and a week where, quite frankly, he had to settle for the least bad option with more appalling publicity for obvious reasons. There's no doubt at all that it's a huge amount that has been reported in the Daily Telegraph, some £12 million, and the Telegraph reported that there'll be a balance between Virginia Giuffre's charity and also her personal, the amount that he'll be giving to her, and of course there are legal fees involved. The whole thing, it's essential to emphasise that, in my opinion anyway, from what I've read, the taxpayer will not be involved in any way at all in the settlement. And the sale of a chalet, which Andrew and his former wife, Sarah Ferguson, whom he cohabits, own, there are reports that that will be something in the region. They say it's been sold for something around 18 million. So that will be very, very significant probably, but I don't obviously know how there'll be a breakdown.
Yeah, nobody really knows how much that he's going, you know, he's had to pay out. But the thing is, all of these things must have put a real toll on the Queen, because she looked very, she's been looking a little bit shaky the other day. She said she couldn't move. I mean, maybe she was coming down with the virus, which is why, you know, she felt like that, which is...
That was on Wednesday when she met two defence attachés. I thought it was a bit of a joke, but she did look a little frail, I think. People felt that. But equally, there is within her, as you know, as she once said so famously, I must be seen to be believed, before the Platinum Jubilee year began on the 6th of February. There was an appearance at community workers joined her at Sandringham, where she cut the cake.
I love that. That's such a nice little video. I kept watching it again because she said, oh, should I cut it? And then she cut it, and then she put the knife. And who doesn't want to cut a cake and get to the bottom there? I love cutting
especially when you're commemorating a anniversary which is unique in over 1,000 years. So as we look forward to June and the celebrations there, I mean, obviously everything will be monitored, and obviously what the Queen is able to do in the coming weeks, and we know in the coming days the shoot will be light duties. I mean, this will be very, very significant that will be very carefully handled. But the other thing this week, of course, I mean, Prince Charles, not good news, because his foundation, former Chief Executive Officer Michael Fawcett, is being investigated on issues dealing with cash for honours. That's been illegal since 1925. Lloyd George gave them out like confetti, and in this case, this is clearly an embarrassment, because for 40 years he was with Prince Charles and extremely close to him.
Well, I mean, obviously that's another thing that the Queen's going to have to deal with as well. I mean, there's so much going on.
Prince Harry as well.
I know you've been so busy as well, I should imagine. Well, we'll keep everybody updated. Thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. And of course, Richard Fitzwilliams, royal commentator, with that update about the Queen. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, Prime Minister Boris Johnson says evidence suggests that Russia is planning the biggest war in Europe since 1945. There's also warnings from the Foreign Secretary that Vladimir Putin will keep waging war on neighbouring countries if he's allowed to invade Ukraine. But first, let's get an update with your weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking wet and windy as Storm Franklin begins to move into the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Zooming into the southwest, and the afternoon rain will have cleared, leaving a mix of clear spells and blustery showers. It'll be windy with gales along the coasts. Across the southeast, it'll be a very wet start to the evening with some gusty winds around as well. The rain should turn more showery later on. Over to Wales now, and here we'll see plenty of showers, some of which will be wintry, especially over the mountains. Widespread gales are also likely around the coast. Let's head over to the Midlands and northwest of England, where we'll see plenty of showers this evening, with again some being rather wintry over higher ground. It'll feel chilly as well, especially in the strong winds. Northeast England will get a little bit of shelter from the showers, but some will make their way across the Pennines. Winds will not feel as strong here, but it will be quite chilly too. Over in Scotland, there'll be plenty of showers, with some feeling wintry at times, even at fairly lower levels. The strongest winds will be across the southwest, with gales here. Turning to Northern Ireland now, and the winds here will continue to strengthen this evening, with severe gales possible later. An amber warning will also come into force later on tonight. Okay, over tonight, Storm Franklin will continue with plenty of showers, very strong winds, especially across the northwest of the country. That's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So it's coming up to 54 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Right, let's now get the latest on the possible invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says evidence suggests that Russia is planning the biggest war in Europe since 1945. And the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has also warned that Vladimir Putin will keep waging war on neighbouring countries if he is allowed to invade Ukraine. International monitors have reported a dramatic increase in attacks, which has led to the death of 2 Ukrainian soldiers by shelling. So let's speak to Alexander Krabet. He's an international news editor of ZN-UA in Kiev. And I'm also joined by Keir Giles, a senior consulting fellow at of the Russia and Eurasia programme at Chatham House. Alexander, thank you both first for joining me. Alexander, let's start with you, though. We spoke to you last weekend and you were feeling relaxed and said that most people in Kiev were also feeling that way. Has the situation changed?
Hi, Nana. Yes, the situation since the last week changed, but people has more anxiety, of course, because of all of this that news war coming, like spreading all over the media, all over the TV channels, and the politicians and the Western politicians are saying all of those things. And for the last three days already, the huge escalation in Donbass, in the eastern part of Ukraine. So a lot of shells alongside all over the contact line, the front line. So when the people are scary sometimes, yeah, but they are here in Kiev, it's more calm for sure. But I'm talking to the local people who are living in those occupied territories in Donetsk and Luhansk. So they hear that shellings are so close to their neighborhoods. The one guy I was talking to yesterday, he was saying that my whole building is shaking, but they still try to calm themselves and try to not panic over there, especially because they're not allowed to leave the territory, and the Ukrainian military is saying we do not provoke, we do not fire and we just watch, and we only fire if it's threatened to our soldiers or to the civilians in the governmental control area.
So the shelling that you're hearing is definitely from the Russian side into Ukraine. Is that definitely the case? Yeah.
Yeah, we have it was a big case. Maybe you've been seeing this. So the 3 days ago, the pro-Russian militia, they fired at the kindergarten in Stanitsa Luhanska. It's just a few kilometers away from the front line. And the Russian telegram channels, Russian state TV, Russian state-owned media and agencies, they started to spread this kind of fake news that it's the Ukrainian army shelled the kindergarten in the occupied territories, and they say this is not we shelling, but Ukrainian police was really quick to release the video that while the Ukrainian policeman in Ukrainian uniform is evacuating the 30 children from the inside of the kindergarten and 14 staff members inside. So
something is definitely happening there. Keir, I want to ask you about the comment made by the UK Foreign Secretary Liz Truss today. I mean, she says that Vladimir Putin will keep waging war on neighbouring countries if he's allowed to invade Ukraine. Would you agree that that's what's going to be happening?
Absolutely,
yeah, for
that's
sure.
Because on the cards, and you need to look at the overall demands that Putin is making on the West, and remember that this is not all about Ukraine. Certainly, that's what's getting the most attention, because Ukraine is the lever that Russia is using with this threat of invasion. And as you heard from Alexander just now, people are already under artillery fire in those eastern provinces. But it doesn't stop there, because what Putin has demanded is a rolling back of NATO so that Russia can once again assert itself over the whole of Eastern Europe that used to be under Moscow's domination. And we've actually already seen that problem played out. Today we hear that the Russian troops that had moved to Belarus supposedly for an exercise, although Western powers say this is for part of the threatened invasion of Ukraine, are not going home. In other words, Russia has already moved forward into another country which directly borders Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, our NATO allies. So the move forward is already underway, and Ukraine is simply the front line at the moment.
I mean, doesn't this go back to when we I think the European Union got Ukraine to drop their nuclear weapons and become disarmed, and we promised protection, which then made them very weak to a threat from Russia.
Well, a lot of people now are pointing the finger at that agreement where not just Ukraine, but other former Soviet republics decided they were better off without nuclear weapons and passed them back to Russia, which became the sole remaining nuclear power. And people are now saying, well, that actually means that they have no way of deterring aggression of this kind from Russia. And it's really interesting to compare and contrast the two ways that Ukraine and Belarus are going on this at the moment. Ukraine is left defenseless. Belarus is now talking about changes to its constitution so that it can have nuclear weapons back on its territory again, but Russian ones, because they are already under Russian control. And it's just another symptom of that Russian power moving forward to pose a more direct threat to NATO.
Wow. I mean, well, obviously we'll keep an eye on that, and thank you both for giving me your perspective on it. That's Alexander Krabet, he's an international news editor, and also, of course, Keir Giles. Thank you so much for joining me, both of you. Right, so you're watching me, Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. More to come in the next hour. So if you've just joined me, it's just gone 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua, and me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. That's mine, theirs, and of course it's yours. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. Messages of support have been posted after Buckingham Palace confirmed the Queen has tested positive for COVID. In a statement, the Palace said Her Majesty's experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but expects to carry out light duties this week. The head of state, who's 95 years old, tested positive after coming in direct contact with her eldest son and heir, the Prince of Wales, the week he had the virus. Buckingham Palace says she'll continue to receive medical attention and follow all appropriate guidelines. Royal commentator Dickie Arbiter told GB News she's obeyed the restrictions during the entire pandemic.
Nobody can forget that picture of the Queen sitting in the choir stalls at St George's Chapel at the funeral of her husband, the late Prince Philip, sticking to the regulations, social distancing. So they have stuck to the rules. I think the problem is that there are other members within Windsor Castle who have contracted COVID, which means that, it might have been pretty virulent, that the people that she comes in direct contact with haven't tested positive, but those sort of on the edge have.
Dickie Arbiter. Well, Grant Harold, the former royal butler to Princes Charles, William and Harry, explained how he felt when he heard the news.
It was that shock of, I hope she's okay. Literally, that shock. Just praying that she'll be okay. And thankfully, obviously, the palace have said it's mild symptoms. But the other thing that amazed me was the palace have actually made this announcement quite quickly because, as you know, they don't very often give out kind of notices about the members of the royal family and their health. This is quite significant. They've actually let everyone know at this stage that she has contracted the virus.
Former royal butler Grant Harold. Well, the Russian President Vladimir Putin's agreed to trilateral talks with Ukraine. It comes after Belarus announced joint military exercises with Moscow are being extended. There's been growing concern over increased shelling in eastern Ukraine, with the country's armed forces releasing a video of an injured serviceman. It also reported the deaths of 2 soldiers. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's warned if Russia invades, it would be the biggest conflict in Europe since World War II, and the death toll could be huge.
I'm afraid to say that the plan that we're seeing is for something that could be really the biggest war in Europe since 1945, in terms of sheer scale. I think people need to understand the sheer cost in human life that could entail, not just for Ukrainians, but also for Russians and for young Russians.
Boris Johnson. An amber weather warning has been issued for Northern Ireland ahead of Storm Franklin. It comes just 2 days after Storm Eunice caused what providers say was the biggest national power outage on record. Around 155,000 people are still without electricity. Yellow weather warnings are also in place for Wales and most of England, with winds of up to 70 miles an hour expected to cause more problems. Tributes have been paid to DUP MLA Christopher Stalford, who died suddenly over the weekend. The 39-year-old, who represented South Belfast, is survived by his wife and 4 children. Leader of the DUP, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, says his contribution was felt across the political spectrum.
Christopher loved representing his constituency of South Belfast. He wanted to work for everyone. And we're also grateful to the many messages we've received from other political parties as well. Christopher had the capacity to reach out across the political divide, and he was someone who wasn't afraid to do the heavy lifting and to push the boundaries and to try and make Northern Ireland a better place for all of us.
Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. Rescuers have found the body of a missing passenger on a burning ferry in Greece. The discovery came just hours after a survivor was located on the stern of the vessel as it was being towed towards Corfu. The fire on the Italian-flagged Euro ferry Olympic, which was sailing from Greece to Italy, started in the early hours of Friday morning. 10 people are still unaccounted for. A helicopter has crashed dangerously close to swimmers on a crowded beach in Miami. No one on the beach was injured, but 2 of the 3 people on board were taken to hospital. They're said to be in a stable condition. And Great Britain has won its first Olympic curling gold medal in 20 years. The women's team dominated the final against Japan to win 10-3. In a message, the Queen sent her warmest congratulations to both the men's and women's teams on their outstanding performances. Captain Eve Muirhead says it was a proud moment.
Feel phenomenal. It's a moment that we're going to remember forever. This team has put in a fantastic shift this week. We're very proud of each other, and yeah, we can't wait to celebrate together.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to Nana.
So good afternoon. It's just coming up to 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. And for the next few hours, or the next hour, so it's only 1 hour left, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. The show is all about opinions, so mine, theirs, and of course it is yours too. And we'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one gets cancelled. So joining me today, broadcaster Danny Kelly and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Still to come, in a few moments, I'll be taking a look at life on the outside of cricket, in fact, and I'll be speaking to former England international cricketer Monty Panesar. Now, having made his England Test debut in 2006, he went on to having a glowing career as an established spinner, playing in a number of Ashes series. And then, of course, we'll have our Great British Debate this hour, and I'll be asking, should we ban gambling adverts? Now, this week, the NHS announced it's set to stop taking money from the gambling industry for addiction treatments as it faces record demand for its specialist support. Meanwhile, research suggests 75% of people in the UK think that there should be tighter restrictions on gambling adverts to support people with addictions. So I'm asking, should we ban gambling adverts? And then after 5:30, I'll be joined by the CEO of the new social media platform Getter and former senior advisor to Donald Trump, Jason Miller. I'll be asking, how can you stand out in a crowded social media world? You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or why not send me a tweet at gbnews. Right, but let's start this hour by getting some more reaction to the news that the Queen has tested positive for coronavirus. The Queen, who's 95, has been in contact with her eldest son, the Prince of Wales, who tested positive last week. Let's go to our reporter Ellie Costello, who's in Windsor this afternoon, and she's there now. Ellie, where is she? Oh, yes. Right. Ellie, so there you are in Windsor. Have we got any more updates? Is there any more news?
Good afternoon, Nana. Well, no, there's no new news. We do know that there is a great deal of concern for Her Majesty, our 95-year-old monarch, almost 96-year-old monarch, who we know was suffering with poor health before Christmas. So speaking to people that are gathered around Windsor Castle today, there is a great sense of concern for the Queen. People asking if she is okay. We know that she is in Windsor Castle just behind us. She's inside those walls somewhere recovering with coronavirus, which would be a concern for anybody of her age. We did receive this statement just before lunchtime from Buckingham Palace. It said Buckingham Palace confirms that the Queen has today tested positive for COVID. It says that she is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, which will be a huge relief to so many people. And it also says that she expects to continue light duties in Windsor Castle this week. So I think there's two significant things to take from that statement, Nana. I think the first is the timing. It's very, very rare that we hear from the palace on the day that something happens. So the fact that the Queen has tested positive today and already there is a statement out, I think that is there to alleviate concern and to make it clear to the public that there's no need to worry at this stage, that those symptoms are mild. And I do think that the fact that she is continuing with those light duties suggests that there's no need to be too concerned at this point. We know that our Queen is stoic and hard-working, and the fact that she does want to continue on light duties would suggest that there's no need for concern at this point. So what do those duties mean? Well, it probably means that she will be meeting with ambassadors via video link, which we have seen her do twice this week. She was taking precautions anyway, because she did meet with her son, Prince Charles, the heir to the throne, on the 8th of February, and 2 days later he actually tested positive for coronavirus. And then his wife, the Duchess of Cornwall, she also tested positive. Camilla has been self-isolating since then. So the Queen was already taking precautions, and we now know that she has tested positive for COVID. But inside these castle walls, she will be being looked after by her doctor. His name is Professor Sir Hugh Thomas, and he and his team will have the Queen in the best possible care. So the sense from Windsor and the sense from Buckingham Palace is the Queen is being looked after and is in the best possible place.
Well, listen, thank you so much, Ellie. We'll keep us up to date with that as well. Thank you so much. That's Ellie Costello in Windsor. Right, so it's now time for my feature Outside, because each Sunday I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And this week, a man who knows exactly what it's like to represent his country at the highest level of international sport, Monty Panesar. He played cricket for England from 2006 to 2013 and experienced everything from a 5-0 Ashes thrashing to winning the tournament for the first time since 1987. He went on to mentor the Australian team on spin bowling, and he's been heavily involved in teaching the next generation of cricketers. And I'm very pleased to say that Monty joins me in the studio this afternoon. So, Monty, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Nice to have a chat with you. So, let's talk about the fact that you love cricket so much. Where did that come from?
Yeah, it came from, actually, my father. He used to play for, actually, Luton Tack College, and then my dad's sort of best friend used to have a Sunday morning, cricket youth training at Luton Town and Indians, which actually amalgamated. It was Luton Town originally, and we were called Luton Indians, and then they needed the members, we needed the great facilities, and that's how the club was called Luton Town and Indians. And that's where, my love for the game and that passion, to play for England came from.
We used to love cricket. Cricket was a great game. We used to play that for fun. That was good stuff. I mean, I was never any good at it, but you were pretty good at it, and you made a debut in 2006 for England. I mean, what was that like, actually playing for the national side?
Yeah, that was amazing. That's something that I didn't ever think I would, play for my country. And things changed for me at the age of 15 when I was at Bedfordshire at Upper Sunday College, where Paul Taylor, who used to play for Northants, and Tony Pemberthy were there. And I wanted always to be like Wasim Akram. When I watched the 92 World Cup, I always wanted to bowl fast like him. But I couldn't, bowl quick. And he said to me, why don't you try spin, with my long fingers and, broad shoulders
Well,
that I had.
apparently you've got unusually large hands.
Yes.
So have I.
Yeah, and with the long fingers, that allows me to generate the pace.
Let's see whose hands are bigger.
Spin.
Let's see them. I think my hands are probably bigger than yours.
Well,
not bad at all.
Must be good.
No, I'm no good at it. So so go on.
So he said to me, you should change to spin bowling, and the next game I played for Bedfordshire under-15s against Worcester under-15s at the Royal Grammar School, and my parents took me there, and I took 7 for 35. And
is that good? Because I'm not great with the scoring. 7 for 35. So that means. Is that 7 people out for 35
runs?
Oh, that is very good. So so they didn't get more than 5 each.
Well, let's just say 7 for 35. It's a good sort of starting point for me. And I went back to Paul Taylor, and he said you should stick to bowling spin. So that was that piece of information that kind of like, if you never told me, I don't think I would have been playing for England. So. It was brilliant. Northants were absolutely brilliant, supporting my career and taking me, and so the other counties as well. And 2006, I thought to myself, I don't think I'll be playing against India in India. And obviously they wanted an attacking spinner, England at the time, and Andrew Flintoff backed me, and he said, I want you to play in that first Test match. And then took Sachin Tendulkar, which I think is one of the greatest sportsmen ever, as my first Test wicket, and then. That was it. I was sprung into limelight.
Wow, that must have been great. And also, I read that you're left-handed, so you're a left-handed spinner. Does that throw people? Pardon the pun.
Well, they always say that left-hand sportsmen have, sports people have they just make the game look a lot more easier. You look at the likes of Brian Lara, David Gower. We had Bishan Bedi at the time. I don't want to say myself. Maybe
you are in there, Monty. You're in there.
Ryan Giggs. They're all sort of they make the sport look just slightly more artistic than maybe the right hand gifted players. So I would probably say when you look at Wasim Akram again, here's another one. So when you look at all of these kind of sports people, they do have an advantage, I think. I think they're able to. It's angles that you negate. There's the rough that we have when we play in a Test match. You're able to exploit them conditions. I think there is an advantage being left-handed.
And talk to me about what it's like. Because obviously, being Sikh, it's an England team that you're playing for. Did you experience much racism as you were playing the game? That's been the forefront of the news for quite a bit in cricket in particular.
Well, I think for me, maybe I was slightly not looking for that, or I had people around me, like I had a life coach who just said, look, I just want you to play for England, and we've got to focus on taking wickets, and performances is what's going to keep you in the team and get you to the top. Look, I'm not denying that what's out there and people are experiencing does exist. But then people ask me the question, how did you get to the top and play for England? And I think maybe one of the reasons helped me to have that protective blanket was having a good team around me, a life coach and, fitness trainers, and that kind of helped me. And if there's other young sports people out there who want to, play for their country in rugby, cricket, any other sports and represent England, maybe, a mentor or life coach could help, towards that. But yeah, look, I think people are having much more bigger discussions about diversity, inclusivity, in sport, and how we can sort of help that, especially at leadership levels and also representation.
Well, it's very important as well. And I notice also that you always wear your patka, which is what you're wearing on your head, whilst you're playing. And that became a thing, right? A lot of people emulated that.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I played for England. In India, I remember Andrew Flintoff said to me, look, I think this Monty mania is existing in England already overnight. And I didn't really believe him until I played, my first-class game against Derbyshire. And there was people with the patkas and the fake beards and
they went with the beards as well.
Yes, they even made the effort to do that. And that's the great thing about, the fans in this country. They really pick up on, people's different sort of, characteristics or distinguish, features. And it's part of just their sort of, support.
Well, you see, that's nice.
Cricket.
But, as that's evolved, people would probably find that offensive and all this because there's a whole woke brigade now that even if you emulate something or they'll call it cultural appropriation or something like that, when actually it was a compliment, right?
Yeah, I think that's what it was, and we've seen it even like with Moeen Ali. When he plays, people do the same thing. So Look, I don't think it's offensive as long as they're celebrating, you know, the sportsman's talent and their achievements.
So since the cricket, because you went to teach some Australians as well, so you taught some spin there. How did that come about? And then what have you been doing since you left actually playing yourself?
Yeah, I was in Australia, and I think Cricket Australia approached me to work with Steve O'Keefe, and they had the tour to India. And I told him a few tricks of the trade, you know, bowl wide of the crease, how to bowl in India with the pitches are slightly different.
Don't tell them too much.
No, well, I did not try to. I tried not to say too much. I thought, you know, who do okay. But then when he played in the first Test match at Pune, he took, I think, 15 wickets and won the Test match. And sort of everyone was saying, oh God, it's the Monty magic, you know, with Steve O'Keefe, you know, that helped him. So he was a really good spinner. And part of coaching, which I learned, was actually it's about getting to know the person really well in different circumstances. So then when you go and coach them in the nets, it's a lot more easier.
So is that what you've been doing mostly then since you've sort of stopped playing yourself? Is it mostly coaching?
Well, I've also, you know, graduated from St Mary's University and MA in international sports, you know, journalism. So I'm trying to build up, you know, my media career now and follow the footsteps, you know, like yourself, who's obviously been in the industry for over... No, absolutely not.
Get out.
You've been in the industry for over 20 years and, you know...
30, actually.
30, well, yeah.
No.
So it's been...
What follows that, Monty, is you don't look that old.
Exactly. That's why I said 20. but also...
I see.
Yeah, but I think what it is, it's great to, you know, meet people in the media industry and speak to them like I have, you know, with yourself, you know, offset and telling me the challenges and what's good to be a broadcast journalist. And I guess that's my next goal in life, next chapter now. And that's one of the reasons I did the course. So then hopefully I can start building that career.
Maybe you get a show on GBNews. Monty, thank you so much for joining me. It's lovely to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's Monty Panesar. He's a former England cricketer that is outside. So coming up on the way, the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we ban gambling adverts? This week, the NHS announced it's set to stop taking money from the gambling industry for addiction treatments as it faces record demand for its specialist support. But new research also suggests that 75% of UK adults think that there should be stronger regulations when it comes to gambling advertising. So I'm asking, should we ban gambling adverts? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, let's get some weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking wet and windy as Storm Franklin begins to move into the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Zooming into the southwest, and the afternoon rain will have cleared, leaving a mix of clear spells and blustery showers. It'll be windy with gales along the coasts. Across the southeast, it'll be a very wet start to the evening with some gusty winds around as well. The rain should turn more showery later on. Over to Wales now, and here we'll see plenty of showers, some of which will be wintry, especially over the mountains. Widespread gales are also likely around the coast. Let's head over to the Midlands and northwest of England, where we'll see plenty of showers this evening, with again some being rather wintry over higher ground. It'll feel chilly as well, especially in the strong winds. North-east England will get a little bit of shelter from the showers, but some will make their way across the Pennines. Winds will not feel as strong here, but it will be quite chilly too. Over in Scotland, there'll be plenty of showers, with some feeling wintry at times, even at fairly lower levels. The strongest winds will be across the southwest, with gales here. Turning to Northern Ireland now, and the winds here will continue to strengthen this evening, with severe gales possible later. An amber warning will also come into force later on tonight. OK, over tonight, Storm Franklin will continue with plenty of showers, very strong winds, especially across the northwest of the country. That's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. And today on my panel is broadcaster Danny Kelly and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Right, so it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should we ban gambling adverts? And this week, the NHS announced it's going to stop taking money from the gambling industry for addiction treatments as it faces record demand for its specialist support. They said that the decision has been heavily influenced by patients who are uncomfortable about using services paid for by the industry. Now, at the time, research by the Royal Society for Public Health suggests that 75% of British adults believe that there should be stricter regulation when it comes to advertising gambling. They say that the advertising of gambling should be no different to tobacco in the way it's marketed and the way it's restricted. So what do you think? Should we ban gambling adverts? I'm joined by addiction specialist and author of Kick Your Habit, Dr. Robert Lefevre. Robert, thank you so much for joining me. Before we speak about addiction and whether banning gambling adverts would help, now you lost a fair amount of money gambling yourself, didn't you? Tell us a bit about your experience.
Yeah. I used to play poker for anything up to 10 hours a day. That is not responsible for a husband and father. It's not responsible for a doctor. It's absolute madness. And the worst occasion was when I lost 3 months' income on the turn of one card in a poker game. So, you know, wives don't like that very much. And I had to stop. So I was very fortunate in being able to be introduced to the 12-step program, which is first based on Alcoholics Anonymous, but there's also Gamblers Anonymous and many other anonymous fellowships, which help people like me who have addictive natures. I'm not a normal gambler that's gone wrong. I was always compulsive. I'm compulsive in my use of cigarettes, which again is strange for a doctor. I'm compulsive in my use of sugar. My weight used to vary by 50 pounds up and down. You know, I have a compulsive nature. Now, I think the adverts would have no effect on me whatever. It would help people who are just casual gamblers, and stupid gamblers, but compulsive gamblers like me, I'm going to gamble anyway. And I haven't gambled now for 37 years. And I don't do scratch cards. I don't do the lottery. I don't want anything involving taking risk. And every day I get invited to do this, that, or the other with Bitcoin and all the other scams. I've got no intention whatever of going down that route again. I've had too much pain. And that is really what turns us round.
I was going to ask you then, and thank you for sharing that. I was going to ask you then, because in there you also said that if there was an advertising, it wouldn't really make any difference to you, because if you're a compulsive gambler, you would be in any case. Yep. But now you've managed to stop and you've gone through the programme. You mentioned the 12-step programme. And you also mentioned that you get adverts all the time sort of coming to you. Do they have any do you have any compulsion to sort of get back into that from the adverts? And so from that perspective, would you suggest that it might not be a good thing to continue?
Absolutely no, none whatever. And I think the main reason for that is I don't do anything else addictive either. I don't drink alcohol, I don't smoke cigarettes, I don't use sugar or white flour, I don't have recreational drugs or mood-altering prescription drugs, you know, the antidepressants, tranquilizers, sleeping tablets, unnecessary painkillers. I don't do any of that. And consequently, I've got the life of my dreams. I'm very happy here. I've spent the afternoon composing music. This is my major interest nowadays. I love it. But I wouldn't be able to do that if I was preoccupied with what I'd lost or what I thought I might win. And of course, what I shared with you was the worst I'd ever lost. It's like the fisherman boasting about the one that got away. Really, what the message I want to put across is that I haven't gambled now in almost 40 years. And I don't do any form of gambling because I know that once I start, I can't predict where it's going to stop.
What do you think then, and your view of the NHS who've decided to stop receiving funding from gambling companies? Do you think that that's a right step for them to do that?
Well, that's politics, and I don't work in the political field nowadays. But I don't think it's going to have any effect. I think if the NHS said they were going to look at 12-step programs and start teaching them in medical school, which they don't, except for Southampton, they do, but I'm not aware of anybody else who does that. Then, because 1 in 6 of the population have addiction problems of one kind or another, I was taught not a thing about addiction in 6 years of medical school. There's something very wrong in our educational system. And the General Medical Council is responsible to that. I think it's not fit for purpose.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for your thoughts on that, and really good to speak to you. That's Dr. Robert Lefevre. He's an addiction specialist and author of Kick Your Habit. Now, very interestingly enough, I mean, a lot of people do fall into the trap of addiction. I mean, if you've got any views and thoughts as to whether you think that advertising will influence people's decision to gamble, then do get in touch with us. But of course, the Great British Debate, so I'm asking, should we ban gambling adverts? Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Annie says, yes, I remember when bookies had blacked out windows and no adverts for gambling. We certainly didn't seem to have this explosion in gambling addicts. We do now. But more to do with online now. Think the genie, impossible to rebottle. Martin says, yes, as simple as that. If people want to bet, they know where to go. Tempting people to gamble by advertising is selfish and dangerous. Jack says, no. Why can't people control themselves? Well, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News online, on TV and on radio. Coming up, we'll continue our Great British Debate. I'm asking, should we ban gambling adverts? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster Danny Kelly and Conservative commentator Calvin Robertson. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's 5:32. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. Messages of support are being posted after Buckingham Palace confirmed the Queen has tested positive for COVID. In a statement, the palace said Her Majesty is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms but expects to carry out light duties this week. The head of state, who's 95, tested positive after coming in direct contact with her eldest son and heir, the Prince of Wales, the week after he had the virus. Buckingham Palace says she will continue to receive medical attention and follow all the appropriate guidelines. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has agreed to trilateral talks with Ukraine. Earlier today, explosions were heard in the rebel-held city of Donetsk in the east of the country, and the military reported the deaths of 2 soldiers. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's warned that a Russian invasion of Ukraine would be the biggest conflict in Europe since World War II. Rescuers have found the body of a missing passenger on a burning ferry in Greece. The fire on the Italian-flagged Euro ferry Olympic, which was sailing to Italy, started in the early hours of Friday morning. The discovery came just hours after a survivor was located on the stern of the vessel as it was being towed towards Corfu. 10 people are still unaccounted for. An amber weather warning's been issued for Northern Ireland ahead of Storm Franklin. It comes just 2 days after Storm Eunice caused what providers say was the biggest national power outage on record. Yellow weather warnings are also in place for Wales and most of England, with winds of up to 70 miles an hour to cause expected problems. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. I'll be back with the latest headlines at the top of the hour.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, it's fast approaching 36 minutes past 5. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, shortly, I'll be joined by the CEO of the new social media platform Getter and former senior advisor to Donald Trump, Jason Miller. I'll be asking, how can you stand out in a crowded social media world? But first, let's get back to our great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should we ban gambling adverts? This week, the NHS announced it's going to stop taking money from the gambling industry for addiction treatments as it faces record demand for its specialist support. And at the same time, research by the Royal Society for Public Health suggests that 75% of British adults believe that there should be stricter regulation when it comes to advertising gambling. So I'm asking, should we ban gambling adverts? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster Danny Kelly and also Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Danny, I'm going to start with you. I mean, have you ever gambled much?
I was addicted to fruit machines as a kid.
Really?
Yeah, and I can tell you a story about how I knew I was addicted. When I was 18, I used to work in the Lake District as a chef, and I got the train from Liverpool to Preston, and I just had enough money to buy my ongoing ticket. But I saw the flashing lights of a fruit machine in the waiting room, and I had a couple of quid over my ticket. And I was left with a dilemma where I had just enough money to buy my ticket to Windermere train station or to put it in the slot for this tempting hold that was enticing me. and I actually put in the slot. Thankfully, I won.
Yeah, I thought you would. That's why you got. That's why you got addicted.
But no, because when I got to the Lake District, I realised what a problem I had, and I called my father up and told him. And I opened up my soul to my dad. I remember crying my eyes out.
Oh, really? So this is you'd been gambling before, and then you'd seen the machine, and you did it, even though you had hardly any money left. How much did you win?
Well, it wasn't a case of how much did I win. It's the fact that I didn't lose my train fare. And then it dawned on me what a problem I had. And it's a psychological problem like that gentleman on the doctor earlier on. So I do know a little bit about gambling.
Yeah.
The NHS, curiously, we were talking about the NHS funding. The NHS are now going to have to find £16 million extra because they've refused to deal with gambling companies. So that's, again, an extra thing. It's like having a cancer ward sponsored by the Marlboro Man almost. I didn't realise that they funded the NHS.
But if you're doing bad, you can at least do some good. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a complicated one, isn't it? Because I don't believe in banning. And this government seems to think that's the answer to everything. Just ban tax, ban tax. But my first political campaign, actually, in 2000 was restricting the number of betting shops on the high street, because in certain areas, especially deprived areas, every other shop is a betting shop because they're preying on vulnerable people, and it's disgusting and it's immoral. So I do think there should be some limitations there. And when you say, the NHS is going to stop taking money, I get that. That's a moral stance. We're not going to take money from the gambling industry. But at the same time, if the gambling industry is causing so much mental damage, maybe we should be getting more money from them.
I think we should. I think that's the wrong way. I think that seeing as they're causing so much carnage, they should be paying for some of the trouble they're causing. I'd be quite happy to take more money off them, actually. I don't know. Yeah. I find it incredible that the NHS is deciding to be sort of very, I don't want to take that money. I will just take it, use it to help support people who have been affected.
There's a conflict, isn't there? You have doctors treating people who are there because of a business funded by the people who are then funding the NHS ward that they're being treated on. The doctors are uncomfortable.
But it's not going to stop, is it?
I agree with Calvin. I have no time for gambling companies. It annoys me when I hear celebrities like Harry Redknapp, who probably earn hundreds of thousands of pounds a year, on the radio, on the telly, and at the very end, they say, when the fun stops, stop. The gambling companies don't give a damn about you. They don't care about when the fun stops. When the fun stops, they want you to put more money in the machine or more money on the roulette.
Although, I mean, they do have I think it's...
They don't care,
Cam or whatever it is. They have different sort of... They try and look good, I suppose. So they try and look like they're doing
but they don't care. They have shareholders to answer to.
Well, they try. I mean, but on the side of the NHS taking money from them, seeing as they don't care, wouldn't you think that would be a good thing, that the NHS should take money from them, seeing as they're causing so much trouble?
Yeah, on reflection, yeah, because the taxpayer's going to have to find £16 million extra.
What do you think, Calvin?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Dr. Robert talked about spending 10 hours a day playing poker. I don't think I can spend 10 hours a day doing anything. So it's clearly a compulsion. It's clearly an illness that needs addressing, this addiction problem. So we need to get the money from somewhere to help these people. And if the gambling industry is making a lot of money off the vulnerable people, we should be taking it back to help them.
And what do you think about adverts then? Should the adverts be banned themselves? Because you don't do banning, you said it yourself, but you have confirmed that they are it's a slight scourge, isn't it? The whole.
Maybe make the advertisements post-watershed or something like that. So you only over.
But they sort of circumnavigate that by doing things on the online, don't they? And that's probably one of the biggest traps. Yeah. You can't control it there. So what would you do?
The internet is a dangerous place, and I do think things like pornography and gambling should be banned from the internet. Yes.
And what would you say, Danny, in terms of banning the actual advertising itself?
Yeah. I think it's like the Marlboro Man enticing you to have a cigarette. Everything that's great about Americana. Yeah, the thing's going to kill you.
But people have their own personal decision, though. I mean, we can't take the full responsibility of people.
The state do mandate us not to do certain things. Like, I can't have 10 pints of lager and drive back to the Midlands.
No, that's fine. They should.
Exactly. So the state should advise me not to smoke, and they should advise me, I believe. And I'm with you. I hate the nanny state, Calv. But I think if banning an advert is going to stop people like the doctor...
But he said it wouldn't stop. He said it
people like the doctor, I said, not him personally.
But he said that people like him and compulsive gamblers really wouldn't take any notice of this. So this whole thing looks like it's focused on people who aren't compulsive but may just have a go here and there.
This is my only experience. But when I was a kid, I went and bought a packet of Marlboro cigarettes because I was enticed by the advert on the television. Now, that's my own personal experience.
Yeah, but you weren't a hardened addict at that time, were you?
No, but as a 12-year-old boy, I went and bought Marlboro cigarettes because of an advert on the telly.
So we shouldn't expose children to this, which is why I think advertisements on the TV should be post-watershed. And on the internet, kids have access to it, so that should be stricter than television.
But having watershed is not banning them, so you would allow those adverts to continue.
I wouldn't have bought a pack of Marlboro cigarettes, maybe, if it was post-watershed.
Yeah.
Adults should be able to make their own decisions, but children should be protected from these things.
So it's okay for them to advertise, and people should make their own decisions ultimately, don't you think? I think that I would agree with you there, and I think it's a lot of personal responsibility, although I do understand that addiction is an illness. I've seen people that are addicted to things, and I realise that they will buy that thing or do that thing instead of feed themselves or feed somebody else, even a child or something like that. So I can see that there is an issue. But the NHS refusing to take money, I think they should just take the money, because I think that at least the gambling companies are doing something, that are putting something back. But I wouldn't ban gambling adverts at all. I'd leave it as it is and make them contribute more to society, because I don't believe it makes that much difference.
Maybe they should tax them more, although they've probably got clever accountants in Switzerland or Geneva or wherever. Maybe they should tax them more. And put that money towards the NHS and funding. Because look, the doctor who said that he lost 3 months' salary on the turn of a card. Yes, he's a compulsive gambler, I get that. But there are people like him, and to a certain extent, like me, when I was an 18-year-old kid, and I gambled away the train fare to go onto my next stop.
Well, thank goodness you got your money back at least.
Maybe we should teach kids about the perils of online gambling and gambling in general, and educate them better, so that as they grow up, they learn to not go down that track.
Because I think we keep saying, oh, we'll take that away, so when you don't see it, if you don't see it, then you won't do it. And that's just not really great, is it? Because we can't educate people in that way. But today I'm asking, should we ban gambling adverts? And lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Bar says, it's all just woke lefties trying to ruin everything. First they banned the cigarette and booze adverts, and now the bookies. Ludicrous. Abby says, gambling doesn't destroy people's lives. I gamble, and I gamble sensibly. People without self-discipline destroy their own lives via gambling. Regulation never works, and certainly not at the expense of an activity that for most people is an enjoyable pastime. See, I'm with her. Louise says, yes, definitely ban gambling adverts. Also, it should be heavily restricted. It seems to cause some people a lot of grief. The level of the industry's huge profits are an indication of how much punters are losing. Well, if you've been affected by this conversation and need some support with gambling addiction, then GamCare is the leading UK provider of free information, advice and support for anyone harmed by gambling. If you want to find them, you could just go to older W's at gamcare or careeven.org. That's www.gamcare.org. Right, so let's move on, because I'm asking, can you stand out in a crowded social media world? Details about Donald Trump's new network, Truth Social, are trickling out as about 500 people are testing the network. The former president announced his plans for the new social media platform, excuse me, in October, promising to rival the tech companies that have banned him from their platforms after the Capitol insurrection. But one of his former senior advisors has created a network himself. It's called Getter and is offering free speech. Joining me now is the CEO of Getter, Jason Miller. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you.
It's good to be with you.
Yeah, right. So what do you make then? Trump is launching his new thing. I think it's Truth Social. I think that's what he's calling it.
Yep. So Truth Social. So they're in their beta testing phase now. I think they may have a little bit more, maybe a couple thousand people that are testing it. And the president has said that probably within the next month or two that they'll be launched. And I think this is actually going to be a good thing for us, for new platforms that are challenging the traditional big tech, whether we talk about Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. And for two reasons. One, Facebook, we know, is a dying platform. They actually lost people last quarter. First time ever that Facebook has lost people. Twitter is a pretty boring platform, in my humble opinion.
And it's pretty harsh as well, Twitter.
But you see the way that we're growing over the past. So, for example, at Getter, we're almost to 5 million users. Twitter stock price has dropped by almost 50% over the last 6 months. So we're taking some of their market share right now. Here's one thing a lot of people don't realize, at least with regard to the United States. When President Trump was deplatformed from social media, about 20 to 25% of all of his supporters quit social media. They said, I'm tired of it, big tech regulating, they don't support free speech. So there are a lot of people that come off the sidelines. But when we talk about how you stand out in a field, I think that's a critical question. I think user functionality, what does that user experience look like? We think with what we've done with Getter, it's very special, not just the free speech, but going into the live streaming, the short video platform. So we start to challenge TikTok and Instagram. But the other thing too that I would say is the international scale, I think is going to be important. The fact that for Getter, only about half of our user base is in the United States. In fact, the UK is now our #3 market, and we're growing pretty rapidly.
So talk to me a little bit more about Getter then. So because you were an advisor to Trump, I mean, what was that like? Go on, take us. It
was like being on a roller coaster with no seatbelt.
Is it really?
It just every day is that. It was kind of a perverse version of every day is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, except some days might be really exciting. You're in the front row seat of history, and other days you're hiding and wondering when the day's going to be over. But it was a lot of fun, and working with President Trump, you always know where you stand with him. I think that's pretty clear.
People like that.
He's exactly the same off camera as he is on camera, and he'll tell you if he agrees with you or if he thinks your idea is terrible. So at least you have the direct conversation. But the thing that I always appreciated about him is that he didn't care about the traditional orthodoxies, or this is the way things have always been done, or we have to do it because we can't go and alienate this lobby or this powerful group. He said, this is what the people want, we'll go do it.
Yeah, he was prepared to try things and just be open-minded, I suppose, in a sense, to see the outcome. So you left. Can you say why you left?
Yeah, so I left last June to go and launch Getter, where I took over as CEO, and some engineers that started building out Getter about 6-7 months, I think, before I joined, and I helped bring it to fruition and launch it last July. Fastest ever social media platform to 1 million users, to 2, 3, 4, and now almost to 5. And the value proposition that we have with Getter is that we support free speech and we oppose cancel culture. And if you believe in those two things and you're tired of big tech regulating, or as we've been seen with a number of the government agencies and regulators start to overimpose, even some of these new laws we're seeing here being proposed in the UK, which I think are pretty crazy about going after. I do, because I think that's a real slippery slope when you start having the government come in and pick winners and losers in the free speech debate. Now, I know the big tech companies are easy to beat up on right now. I beat up on Facebook and Twitter all the time. I just beat up on them just a moment ago. But I do think that the debate right now is online. It's in this digital space. And if you go and overregulate that, then where are you pushing those ideas?
So what about things like, because you've seen it on Twitter where someone piles in and then there's a pile on and all that. So you wouldn't regulate that at all? That would be fine. People can say whatever they want just in a free speech.
So with our terms of service, we do have what I would say is a proactive and a robust social media moderation platform. We can't have people pushing illegal content. Right. We do not allow pornography. There are plenty of places you can get pornography. Getter's not one of them. We don't allow racial or religious epithets. And part of that might legally be protected, but we've made the decision that our community does not want that. We're also growing and scaling internationally, and if you can't make it through a conversation without hurling a racial epithet, there are other platforms for you to go to. But we think we found the sweet spot on the bat where we protect free speech, never censor or deplatform people for their political free speech, and we're growing, I think, as a result.
Well, it's amazing. I'll keep my eye on that. I've joined it now, and I've got quite a few thousand followers. I'm catching up with my Twitter followers, although I don't know what to do on it yet. But as it grows, it'll be interesting to see how it evolves.
You're popular.
Well, that's what they say. Thank you so much, Jason. It's lovely
Nana.
to talk to you. That's Jason Miller. But he will be joining us, though, for our Supplement Sunday, which it is now time for, where my panel share some of the other stories that have caught their eye today. So broadcaster Danny Kelly and Conservative commentator Kelvin Robinson are also joining me. And as I said, CEO for social media platform Getter, Jason Miller. So I'll kick this off with this one. It's a couple of foul-mouthed parrots have been banished from a wildlife centre for swearing. They are back after a boot camp failed to clean up their act. A sign has been put on the outside of their cage at Lincolnshire Wildlife Park, warning people not to stand there if they are offended. They're 5 African greys, and they were removed after their swearing and obscenities shocked staff in 2020. But who taught them that language? I mean, somebody's got to have said it. They only repeat what they've heard. I mean, do you think people are too easily offended? I might as well start with you, Jason, because as CEO for Getter, do you think people are too easily offended?
Well, I think so. I mean, we knew cancel culture was run amok, and this wokeism that unfortunately is the worst ever export from the U.S. is now impacting the zoos. I think that's terrible. But also, why are they discriminating against the parrots? Have you not heard giraffes? They curse like sailors. But they want to go and single out the parrots and say they're the bad actors. I think this is just the nanny state run amok.
What's great about this story is that people should apply it to the cancel culture. If you don't want to be offended, don't go and see Roy Chubby Brown. He's a British comic, foul-mouthed comic, Jace. If you don't want to be offended, don't watch the latest Dave Chappelle. Rather than cancel Chubby Brown, rather than cancel Dave Chappelle, just don't go and see them. It's as simple. And they've put a sign. If you're offended, don't go and stand next to Parrot.
Because it'll swear. But
it'll swear.
I just want to know where it got its language from.
Well, I don't even agree with the signs. I think, why is everything contextualised these days? Just, you go into a zoo, there are some parrots there that might say something slightly offensive. Talk to your kid about it if they hear it. Explain it away. But we don't need to pander to every single slightly offensive.
Panda's very good. Oh, that's a giraffe.
Taxi.
You're having a giraffe.
No.
That's
okay, it went
Leo's
silent.
not
That went silent. That one didn't work out. Right, now, Danny, what have you brought? Let's move on swiftly.
Right, breakfast at Tiffany's. Censorship row erupts after Channel 5 cut an entire character. Now, Jason, you'll be particularly interested in this because this is an American thing, obviously. OK, the movie is being criticised as dangerous. The depiction of Mr. Yoniyoshi, played by Mickey Rooney in the 1961 American romantic comedy, has been deemed racist. His offence, he wore yellow face makeup. He taped back his eyes.
Oh, no.
Yep. And he had, not that this is a characteristic I would associate with people from the Orient, but he had buck teeth. Now, that has been deemed too racist, too offensive, and so the whole character has been cut. Calv, over to you.
How dare they? How dare they editorialise a film that people have grown up with? It's a cult classic. It's, again, wrapping people up in cotton wool, assuming that no one can handle a slight bit of offensive humour anymore. And this is why we have a generation of snowflakes, because people have been, you know, you're not even allowed to see it. You're not allowed to know what offence is anymore. It's ridiculous.
Jason, I'm sure you must know about this one.
Yeah, again, I think this is terrible. I think you can't go in and start editing out movies. I mean, that changes the ultimate product. I mean, it's gotten to the point after Gone with the Wind being banned altogether, I think going actually editing within the movie may even be a worse offense because then you're picking winners and losers within the movie. But here's the reality. It doesn't matter if it's statues or if it's the history books or if the movies, the woke left is never going to stop.
They don't seem to want to. And anyway, who is the person in control of what you actually watch anyway? The people editing that then suddenly have editorial control. Just, if you don't like it, don't watch it, for goodness sake.
We're not allowed to laugh at things
I know,
anymore,
it's
are we?
awful, isn't it? Well, now on to who's next. What have you got?
Me again.
Is it you again?
Yeah.
What else have you
I'm
done?
going to bring in an apple for teacher next week.
go
I'm
on
the
then.
teacher's pet. It's me again, miss. And this affects America as well, Jason. 1 in 5 second-hand cars in the UK cost more than new models because all around the world there's a shortage of little microchips that make new cars, whether it's in America or whether it's in the UK, meaning that if you want that particular model, you've got to buy nearly new and you're paying more than retail on the new one. And there was a ship actually going to Rhode Island, Jace, you'll love this. 1,100 Porsches on this ship. All of these wealthy Americans waiting for over a year for their new 911. The cargo ship, sets on fire because a battery-operated Porsche self-combusted.
Okay.
So a battery-powered Porsche, the battery combusted,
This is
and
the problem with these
1,100
batteries.
Porsches up in flames,
That's
Jason.
the problem with these
Rhode
batteries.
Island.
What do you think?
I don't understand it, to be honest. I don't understand how a second-hand car can cost more than
Yeah.
a brand-new car.
Yeah.
But I'm with you on this electric-powered nonsense. Just let people buy a car, a traditional
Yes.
car, and drive it.
Petroleum.
And we're saying, you know, everyone needs to buy an electric car, but there are no parking spots to charge.
Is it different
you
in
can't
America?
park outside your house.
Is it different in America, Jason? This electric car phenomena that seems to be taking over the world?
Oh, everything is
It's
green.
being pushed, but it has not been the big rush. And I think part of the reason is people are just worried, what if I drive 30 miles or 40 miles and there's not a charging station?
Yeah.
And so the other thing, too, is it really seems to be this one set of maybe the coastal elites who are pushing to other people in the Midwest, you need to drive the electric vehicle.
If you've got the money, 44 grand in this country. Well, listen, I've got to say, on today's show, we've been asking, should we end self-isolation for people with COVID? According to our Twitter poll, 75% of you say yes, the remainder say no. I've got to say thank you so much to my panel, broadcaster Danny Kelly and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. And also thank you to you, Jason Miller, Getter CEO, for joining me, and to you at home for being part of the show. I'll be back on Friday. I'll leave you with more weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking wet and windy as Storm Franklin begins to move into the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Zooming into the southwest, and the afternoon rain will have cleared, leaving a mix of clear spells and blustery showers. It'll be windy with gales along the coasts. Across the southeast, it'll be a very wet start to the evening with some gusty winds around as well. The rain should turn more showery later on. Over to Wales now, and here we'll see plenty of showers, some of which will be wintry, especially over the mountains. Widespread gales are also likely around the coast. Let's head over